Well, how many of you have eaten your Smarties already? Those of you who need it, that's all. Little guy by the name of Dustin went to church one day, and he was carrying in with him his package of Smarties. He had just discovered Smarties, right? I don't know if you remember how old you were, but there is that age when kids discover this candy. And so he was carrying the Smarties in. He'd gotten them out in maybe the lobby or whatever, and the pastor noticed that he had Smarties. And so the pastor asked him if he would share, if the pastor could have one. And so Dustin gave Pastor Rick the first Smartie out of the package. And he took it, and Pastor writes that they sort of shared a laugh together and spent a couple minutes having a Smartie. Well, over the next 2 years, whenever Dustin would get Smarties, he would bring one to the church and give it to the pastor when he saw him. And Pastor Rick said it was interesting that was something that for about a 2 to 2.5 year period, 2 to 3 times a month, the little guy would bring the Smarties in, and he and pastor would share Smarties together. At some point into this, the mom said to the pastor how much the little guy looked forward to taking the first roll out of the bag and saying, I'm setting this aside for Pastor Rick. And that's what he would do. He would come in and pull it out of his pocket with his little hands and offer it to the pastor. Kind of crazy. The mom said, you know, Pastor, I think he's really learning what it is to share, to be generous, to give back. And sure enough, the pastor, over time, came to see this little guy, and it touched him in such a way that he began to reflect himself and ask himself this question: what am I doing with my Smarties? Here's the truth. You've all got Smarties. Each and every one of us have things that are of value to us. And the question isn't, will you have things valuable? You have things that are valuable. The issue becomes, what will you do with that which you consider valuable? What will you do with your Smarties? This morning I want to touch on the subject of wealth, on money. I want to talk about it because it was interesting to me. If you have your notes and you want to take them out, one of the things that I have in there for you, read a couple of guys this week who did the math, and anywhere from 100, there's a line there that says, I used the number 110 verses out of 915. 110 times out of 31 chapters, Solomon references money or wealth. That's 12% of the book is written on money. If you've been in church, you've probably heard it said that Jesus taught more about money than about heaven and hell. Jesus talked a lot about money and wealth and what you do with your possessions because they reveal something of what's in your heart. It's not that as I am a pastor and I'm acutely aware of people say, oh, the church just wants your money. I suppose that may be true, and I, along with the next person, abhor whenever I hear a pastor that's got gold toilets or flies on a Gulf Stream or whatever, and I'm like, oh man, I mean, your gift to me today, right? Let's just acknowledge this is honest, right? Your gift to me today is I have to go bring somebody back something. Okay? Work with me here. Where's the gift in this, right? Do you understand? In fact, Sean left the room, but do you understand the immense pressure I'm now under? I have to bring the mineral water back. We're going to Hot Springs the first part of the week. I got to travel with us all week now, not break it, remember to get it, and then get it back to Sean. And that's a gift, right? See the disconnect in my mind there? I got 4 guys that want to, I'm not getting a gold toilet. I got 4 guys that want to treat me to hot dogs and chips. I mean, it's not like I'm not appreciative. Really, don't hearing that the wrong. But I can buy my own hot dog and chips. Okay, you know. So I abhor with the rest of you, and I think that has happened, right? In denominations and churches, you hear stories. This pastor did that, and he's got this, and he's driving a Bentley or whatever, and I'm like, dude, I can't even say I wish, because I don't wish for that kind of stuff. But so I understand how the church has gotten a bad rap regarding money, but I also understand that money is one of the most sensitive things that you'll deal with. I read a survey this week by the National Association of Brides that says, if I'm doing this by memory, like over 50% of the first fights in marriages have to do with money. One of the first things that couples fight over is money. Why is that? Why do people fight over money? How many families do you know have been torn apart over inheritances? Has yours? Has your family suffered because things weren't equitable in the death of a loved one, and you felt treated unfairly with that? Somebody got a little more than you did, and so now relationships and families are strayed over what? Money. You felt you got ripped off. So don't kid yourself that money isn't important to you. Solomon wrote Proverbs to show us how to live in harmony with God and with each other. And one of the ways that we relate to one another is with this thing called money. Now, here's the interesting thing about money, right? Here's 250s. The reason that I think that Jesus said this is important is you give your life to get this. You're trading your time, which is your life, in order to get this. And what's sort of interesting, and I think of this week, it depends on how much of your life you have to give in order to get this, how valuable this is to you. Let's just take this $50. Let's take the 100. $100, and if you are fortunate enough to work for $15 an hour, that's 6 hours of your life to get $100. Anybody here, don't show a hand, anybody here work for $100 an hour? You only gave 1 hour to get this. You work for more than $100 an hour? And so you can see why, to somebody, $100 might seem like a big deal, because you spent a lot of your life to get this. To somebody that just earned this in 15 minutes, chump change. Not a big deal at all. So for some of you, if I said, hey, would you want $50 if I was giving it to you? You would jump at it. Others of you, if I said, well, what if I offered you a 20? 20 is not a big deal. I get 20 all the time, right? You know how I evaluate a lot of things I do? I've never really calculated how much the church pays me by hour. I don't know. You guys give me a salary. I love it. It supports what Patty and I do. But so you can understand my point of reference, I know that on a good varsity softball game that pays $79 a game, if I work 79 minutes, that's an hour and, what is that? That's an hour 29? Did I do that right? Hour 19? Hour 19. If I work in an hour and 19, I'm getting $1 a minute to work that game. So largely where I've come to evaluate life is like, how many softball games did it cost me to do this? If I want that jacket, how many softball games do I have to work in order to have that? If I want whatever item that I'm looking at, I evaluate it in terms of, did I stand in the cold for that? Did I have to stand in the heat to earn that? Is it worth it to me, right? This represents your life. You're trading your life for this, and then you have to take this and trade it for what you want. You want medicine? You have to give your life to get this, so you give this for medicine. You want to be smarter? Besides coming to church and getting a Smartie? You have to give your life to get this, to pay a teacher. You want a jacket? You're going to give your life to get this, to pay the retailer. This is just a commodity. And so you can see why people misinterpret and say, money is the root of all evil. Money is not the root of all evil. Money is just a commodity. It is the love of this. It's when you pursue this. It's when you make this your obsession that you're going to be in terrible trouble. That's why at the beginning of your outline I say, God is not against wealth. God is not anti-wealth. The Lord is not against you and I having this. You need this in order to buy medicine, education, a house, light, heat. You need this. What you can't do is make it your life to pursue this. God is not against you having this. He's against you trusting this. He is anti you putting your trust in this. And you know why? You honestly know why. I know you know this. You just don't, it doesn't resonate with your heart. This does not last. This does not last. Some of you just went, man, you just threw $50 away. Didn't you? And I honestly could say to you, so what? But see, you just went, oh, that was $50. That was $100. And that ought to tell you something about your heart. You are giving your heart to get something that won't last. And Solomon knew it, Jesus knew it, and today I just want to walk through what Solomon had to say on how we can live money-wise and not be foolish-wise with it. Because it is such a big deal. You're going to give your life to get something. And that's what Jesus said. Remember what Jesus said? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? What would you give to have all those $50 bills that you could hug and hold and yet give away your life? Does that seem like a fair exchange to you? Jesus said that type of person is a fool because they don't understand that your heart, who you are as a person, is so much more valuable than how many $50 that I could throw away. But some of you in here and some of you watching online, you don't believe that. You believe the most valuable thing going are those $50 bills. And that your heart somehow is worthless. And you will suffer for that kind of thinking. You will pay a dear price for it. The price will be you will forfeit your soul and you will alienate and you will push away anybody from around you. That's what Jesus knew. That's what Solomon, that's why he spent over 10% of his book telling us, man, be on guard. So let's dig into it. Grab that outline, would you? As I said to you, the Lord is not anti-wealth. He is anti-trusting in your wealth. Proverbs 10:22 says, the blessing of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for it. Solomon knew that wealth and doing well with your money comes from the hand of God. And then when God is in it, good things happen. And when God's not in it, it is really a chore. Some of you are working and you hate your jobs. The only reason you're doing your jobs is because you need what? You're trading your life for $50 bills. Because you need those $50 bills, but you hate what you're doing. And conversely, it's affecting your spirit, and you're poison, you're toxic, and you know it, right? You understand that God's blessing, and I want to talk to you just a little bit about a mind shift of where it was many, many years ago. Someone shared a principle with me that I'd never heard at the time. I want to share it with you this morning that changed my thinking. I still revert back. I still have to fight against it. But in that moment, it stopped me cold. Well, I'd never really considered that, all right? As I said to you, Proverbs was written to demonstrate how we can live in harmony with the Lord and with one another. How much conflict in the world today is over those $50 bills? How much conflict is there in your life because of $50 bills? How many people are you not getting along with over money? Over valuables, possessions, right? And as we see, 12% of what Solomon said had to do with money. All right, there's two ways that I think people get themselves in trouble financially. Two causes of financial pain that Solomon makes a big deal talking about. The first is this, greed. Simply wanting more money, sex, or power. It's a simple definition of greed when you go look it up. all right? He said, let me back up here. Solomon said, go back one slide. Nope, here we go. Proverbs, greed brings grief to the whole family. Those who hate bribes will live. I'm going to blow through these. 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. It's interesting. Everyone who looks for money quickly. I meant to Google, how many play the lotto? I don't want to see a show of hands. How many play the lotto? I would be curious to know what percentage of people who play the lotto win. Why do you play the lotto? Why do you play the Powerball? Because you want to get rich quickly. And you hope, man, there's one ticket, my ship might come in. How long have you been hoping for that ship to come in? How much money have you spent with Powerball, with the lotto? Where could that money have been if you hadn't spent it for a ticket hoping to get rich quickly? I'm just telling you, I find it interesting. Solomon said a long time ago, the person that wants to get rich quickly usually ends up in not doing well. Why? Because there's a sense of working, and then it's even asking yourself, why do you want to win the Powerball? Why do you want to win? Do you not have enough now? Do you not have enough now to live comfortably with you and your family? Because if you answered me, yes, you do, then you're simply saying, I want more. Follow-up question, why do you want more? Why do you want more? What would you do with more? What would you do if you had it? Are you amazed with I am when I look at statistics that say that the average professional athlete is bankrupt 5 years after they're done playing sports? You can check that out. Generally true, the average professional athlete, NBA, NFL, baseball, 5 to 7 years after they're out of the league, they're bankrupt. They made a boatload of money, more money than I'll ever see, and they're bankrupt. Why? How does that happen? And there are reasons for it. I understand it. It's been interesting. But my point is, if you won, what would you do with it? You just want a little bit more, don't you? You never have, Rockefeller was Rockefeller. How much more do you want? Just $1 more. Just want one more dollar, right? If I gave you $50, that make you happy? If I gave you the 100, would you be happier? You'd have maybe an adrenaline rush, but in an hour, you'd be wanting another $100. You'd be saying, well, that was pretty easy. And all I'm saying to you is, Solomon recognizes it and says, man, the person that wants money quickly without any effort, they better take stock. Don't wear yourself out. Proverbs 23, Solomon says, let me read that. 23, 4 and 5. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Have wisdom to show restraint. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone. They will surely sprout wings and fly off the sky like an eagle. What is that? You know what that is? That's the Fed raising interest rates. And we all go, oh, that's your 401k. Tanking. Oh, you thought you had, and then through no fault of your own, nothing you did, you see it evaporate. Riches fly on the wings of an eagle, and yet we're always chasing them. I wrote down here, what's the problem with being greedy? Let me take note. What's wrong with greed? And I wrote down 3 things I'd have you think about. 1, you are never satisfied because you are always comparing yourself to the person who has less than you. No. You never compare yourself to the person with less. You never go look at the family that's struggling to get by. You always compare yourself against the person who has a little bit more than you. That's the one you compare yourself, and you say to yourself, man, they've got, man, why do they have that? How come I can't have that? And so you're never satisfied. There's always unrest in your spirit. You don't have the latest best, right? Greed is wrong because you will find a greedy person. I've never found a greedy person satisfied. And so what they do in order to get more is, some of you have experienced this, they will stab you in the back. They will lie to you. They will undercut you. They will make you look small so that they can look big. That's what greedy people do. And the third thing that I wrote down is, I just touched on a moment ago, there's just never enough. Just could have been one more thing at Christmas. One more birthday gift. How come they didn't remember me? Why didn't they think about me? What are signs of greed? What are legitimate signs? If you're out there and you're just wondering, am I struggling with this? Here's a couple. One is this, that, and this is hard for us, but I bet if we could talk to a circle of people around you, greedy people always make it about them. They are very self-absorbed. And you don't see it that way. But I bet if we talked to your circle of friends and we said, tell me about, the conversation usually centers on you. You dominate it. It's, woe is me, look at me, I don't have, all day. And then the second thing that I want you to think about is, greedy people do not give a rip about others. You don't care about other people. There's little empathy or compassion in your world. If someone else is struggling, so what? That's their problem. And that's usually a sign that it's about you. You don't have eyes big enough, you don't have a heart big enough to see the world. And if you're living self-absorbed, woe is me, oh, they're doing better than I am, you don't care about other people, you might take a real good look in the mirror and say, I might be greedy. And my warning to you, based on what Solomon says, is you're headed for destruction. Your life is not going to end well as a greedy person. You might be doing okay now, but it's not going to go well. I heard about a pastor did a message in his church. He was talking about money, and he challenged people out there. He says, especially older people, he says, why wait until you die to leave an inheritance for your kids to fight over? You're aware that you can leave up to $10,000 a year, right, tax-free, to your children. And so the pastor challenged those with means, instead of waiting till you die to leave an inheritance, give the money to your kids now while they can enjoy it. His thinking was, if they live and now your kids are 50 or 60, they may not need your gift. Right now they may need your gift. And so, boom, that was it. Well, about 3 weeks later, he gets a letter in the mail from a couple that was like, hey, pastor, you taught that message on giving, and my parents were in town that day. They came, they listened. You know what they did? That week, they both wrote my brother and I a $6,000 check. And we sort of affectionately called that the $6,000 sermon. And then you know what they said at the end of the letter? Please preach more messages like that when our parents are in town. They might have a problem with greed. I mean, I love the story. I don't know if it's real or not, but I love the story because what it illustrates is you just got a $6,000 gift that you didn't have, but that's not enough. You want some more. You might have a problem with greed. Hey, the second thing that Solomon talks about that trips people up and causes them grief is they're lazy. Proverbs 10:4 says, lazy hands make for poverty, but the diligent or hardworking hands bring worth. I was doing a little digging. I wanted to just explore this a little bit. Laziness is an insult, isn't it? We don't call people lazy. That really the Protestant work ethic. You hear people you might think it, but you wouldn't really say it because it would really sound offensive, right? To call somebody lazy. All hard work brings a profit. When you merely talk about doing things, that leads to poverty. And then I'm thinking about this, processing this, and how many of you only go back in the last year, the headlines were the number of people on the job that are quiet quitting. in the headlines. You know what quiet quitting is? People who are just doing enough at their place of work. They're not doing more. They don't seek out more work. They don't want to do more work. They are barely doing what they've got to do in the job. And it's called quiet quitting. And I think Solomon would say they're lazy. Laziness is the dictionary definition simply was the failure to act or perform due to lack of effort. 2015 Pew Research asked people, do you think others are lazy? 55% of us said yes. Over half of us look at other people and think they're lazy, which means that those same people look at you and think you're lazy. That's interesting. Are you lazy? Would you consider yourself lazy? There's nobody I know that would say yes. Oh, me? I am. Yeah. Like a bat. No, you're not lazy, are you? No. Would others say you're lazy? Would your friends say that you lack effort? That you just do the minimum that's asked of you? That you don't really pitch in? That when there's something that needs to be done, you have to be waited and asked to do it? You're not at the front line to volunteer to get your hands dirty? Why is that? Is it because it's beneath you? Is it because you're not good enough to do whatever? Solomon would simply say this: if you're struggling financially and you're not willing to work, that might be why you're struggling financially. I want to be very, very careful there. There are people who struggle financially who are hard workers. Absolutely there are. But I think I would be being dishonest if I didn't cast a warning to say, man, some people really need to take a hard look in the mirror and say, am I? Some people don't have a job. You have a resume? No. Are you out looking for a job? Well, I tried. Submitted a couple of resumes. Nobody wants to hire me. I'm just going to sit. Woe is me. Solomon would say, man, take heart. That could be really, really scary. Symptoms you might have a problem with being lazy. You spend a lot of time on social media. The work you have isn't getting done. One side I said, people who, here's a word that is sort of cool, that we sort of can laugh at and give, like, oh, yes, that's me. Procrastination. You just keep putting things off. Well, why not just say you just lack the effort to do it, right? You don't set goals. You don't have a plan for your future. Why is that? Why are you not looking ahead, trying to figure out how am I going to get there? We're going to talk about a little bit here how you can get out of debt if you're in debt. And one of the ways involves working harder, working smarter. But the lazy person doesn't want to do that, right? I went by the field of the lazy man and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. All of those guys out there saying, hey, I'm walking by this house, and there it was, all overgrown with thorns, and its surface was covered with nettles or weeds. The wall was broken down. When I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it and I received instruction. He says, I'm going by somebody's house and it's a mess. And so I stop for a moment and I look and I take stock. And what do I see? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and so shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man, and suddenly that which you want is taken from you, because you wouldn't put yourself out to work. Two ways people end up messed up when they're living otherwise. They're greedy people that are never satisfied, never content, and they're lazy. They really don't want to work. They don't want to do what it takes to get ahead. And if that's you, Solomon would say that's a warning. And I'm not, you got to hear my heart. I'm not trying to be crass. I'm not trying to be mean. I am trying to say, man, don't look at your situation and go, oh, I guess this is my lot in life, when maybe it's you that could make some changes and end up in a better spot. So how do we live money-wise instead of otherwise? 5 principles I want to leave you with today. The art of living money-wise. See the Lord as the source of your income. A long time ago, when I was in my 20s, I was before an elder, and I was talking about the pay I was receiving as a youth pastor in the church. And in the course of that conversation, see, I'm now early 60s, I still remember him saying to me, Mike, one of the things I sense from you is you don't see the Lord as the source of your income. You think it's about what you do and how much you can make and how other people ought to do this for you instead of seeing that God is your provider. And I honestly had to admit in the moment it stopped me. I had never really thought that God is my provider. I thought, I've got to do this. And so I think what Solomon is saying here, better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble with it. It's better to have a little less, but your heart is right with God. Fear of the Lord simply means a reverence for, you're in right relationship with the Lord. Better to be in right relationship with the Lord and have a little than have a whole bunch of stuff, but your heart's out of sort. We're going to talk about in just a moment why that's a problem, okay? Come on now, slide. There we go. Oh. Next slide. The name of the Lord is a strong tower in Proverbs 18, and the righteous run to it and are safe. If you're struggling financially, I would consider you the first place you ought to go is ask the Lord for help. Ask the Lord for wisdom. And be honest to what he might say. Now, early on, here's what I thought that meant. You ask God for help and you get a Brinks truck that suddenly on Wednesday backs up to your door. Right? And the guy says, I got a delivery for you. And there's a couple money bags that fall off the truck. Right? Or you just stumble across like a whole sack of money as you're walking your way into Kohl's. Wow, where did this come from? Thank you, God. Right? That's how most of us think God provides. Sometimes that's honestly how it is. Patty just walked out, so it's safe to share this. Uh-oh. This was amazing to me this week. She's in a state of transition from leaving her job in early childhood with the school system and transitioning to a full-time position with somebody she's been with part-time for, 20, 30 years, long time, right? And so we were wondering in this month of October, there's going to be a gap of income, okay? Not something we can't live without, but there's going to be a gap of income, right? And I'm doggone if she doesn't get a phone call from a friend of ours saying, hey, I got a showing for a house. Will you just go over on a Saturday for 2 hours, and I'm willing to pay you $300 for 2 hours to just sit in the house. And then lo and behold, if that family, one of the families wanted to come back at 9 o'clock at night and see the house with their kids. And so she texted the person, hey, this family wants to come back. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. And our friend said, I'll give you more to go back and show them the house. Penny ended up with $500 for about 3.5 hours. Now, I'd like to work for that rate. Do the math. $150 an hour, right? I was wondering, how's the Lord going to make this up, right? How are we going to make up that gap? And it ended up being that for about 3.5 hours, she showed a house. Just had to sit there. When you see that the Lord is the source of your income, and He's your provider, He's the one you appeal to, and then you're listening and you're watching and you're waiting. Remember, first time that I gave a significant gift to a missionary, somebody going on a short-term trip, and the Lord put on my heart, I had $500 of rough money. So my disposable income, I knew I had $500 there. And I was like, you should give it. And I'm like, all of it? I really remember the conversation, Lord, all of it? He's like, yeah, all of it. Like, man, that's $500. I mean, I like the person, but I don't know if I like him $500 worth. I ended up writing a check, $500. And once I wrote it, I'm like, okay, well, all right, I'll do some more basketball. Okay, it's all good, right? And I believed in the cause, believed in what the person was doing. About 2 weeks later, we're driving our minivan, just out on highway on Mexico Road, right by Lowe's. It was just, the rain had just stopped and the roads were still slick. And we got rear-ended. Very little damage to the vehicle. We were fine. Wasn't our fault. Thank you, Lord. Wasn't our fault. So the guy, right? But here was the funny thing to me. Literally, the phone call 2 days later from the insurer, the other insurer, was like, hey, you know what? We'd like to offer you $500 just for your trouble. I was honestly blown away because it wasn't, they didn't offer us $475 and they didn't offer us $525. Where did they pick $500 from? I don't know. I'm just saying I had just released $500 feeling like that was a big deal. And within a week's time, I felt like the Lord had made that up. If you see yourself as the source of your provider and you've got to work and you've got to labor and you've got to do this and that, then by golly, that's what you've got to do. If I see the Lord as the source of my provision and I'm looking to Him, then I'm trusting that He's going to provide what I need when I need it. Those are not the same mindset. And you can't flip them on and off, back and forth, which is what I think some of us like to do. I'll trust you here, God. Oh, this is cool. Look, we got, oh, man, now I got, All right. Asking for help, because the name of the Lord is a strong tower and righteous people run to Him. Here's the second way, is your reputation and your relationships are more valuable than you think. Solomon spent a lot of time talking about, here's Proverbs 13, good people leave their grandchildren an inheritance, but the wealth of sinners is stored up for the righteous. And I was looking at this going, well, on first glance, this is like us grandparents got to set money aside so our kids have it. Which is interesting. Because I think we want to, but some of us don't have the means to do that, right? And I was digging apart this a little bit. The wealth of sinners is stored up for the righteous. There's a sense here in which Solomon is saying is people who have no regard for God, their money just sort of maybe ends up in the hands of God's people. But I don't know how he does that. I'm just saying I'm reading this. But the first part of the verse, I'm digging it apart. And one guy said this that really resonated with me. Because what if you're a godly grandparent, but you don't have much? Do you know what you do have? Think about this. You have your influence. What kind of name are you leaving for your grandkids? What are your kids going to remember about you, mom and dad? The money you left them? Sure, maybe. What if you don't have much to leave? What about your influence? What about the way you looked at difficulties? What about your faith? What about just your trusting God for the things of life? How much would you pay for that? Because your kids are going to need that same thing when they get out in the world. Solomon said, a good name is more desirable than great riches, and to be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Having a good reputation matters more than what's in your bank account. You don't think that's true? Read the headlines. How many wealthy people are in the newspapers? They have a good reputation? You want to be their friend? Why would you want to be their friend? For what they might do for you? Or because you really admire their character? Let me just move along. The art of living money-wise. Make a plan for where you want your money to go. Here he says, again, we're going to come back to that verse, the plans of the diligent lead to abundance. Do you have a plan for where your money goes? Do you have a budget? Do you have a spending plan? How many of you hate the word budget? I do. How many of you resist the word budget? I do. 74% of people say in the U.S. that they have a plan on how they spend their money, and 85% of those people admit to overspending every month. Want to know why you're in debt? Because you have a plan and you don't stick to it, right? So Solomon would simply say, make plans, and then here he says, be sure you know the condition of your flocks. He's talking to shepherds. Give careful attention to your herds. And then he says, riches don't last forever. But know where your money's going. Know what's happening. Know your financial status. Do you know your net wealth? Your net worth? You know what your net worth is? Not the number. Do you know how to get there? It's everything you consider an asset, whatever you got against you, and the difference is your net worth. It's not hard, but it does know you got to know where you're at. What bills do you have? Where's your money going? And most people don't really know where their money's going. It's going a little bit here, a little bit there, and then it's gone. Like the ones that fly away. And that's all Solomon was saying is, man, just be mindful. Eliminate debt. I think here's Dave Ramsey's chart on where people are. You can pick out your age bracket, and you can see here's the average non-mortgageable debt per age bracket. That's average. I did another chart by Northwestern Mutual, had a chart of where people were in terms of being in debt, and the numbers were pretty similar. Where do you stand? Most people are in debt. What was it at? 77% of households, American households, have some type of debt, according to Dave Ramsey. What is debt? It's just simply owing. You owe money on something to someone. Okay? And it is, I read one study that said that debt had been reduced during the pandemic between the monies that were given by the government, and people spent a little less on cars and stuff, and so debt got paid down. But it's slowly creeping back up as we're getting back out in the world. Now, this isn't meant to make anybody feel guilty. I'm just simply saying if you want to get ahead financially, one of the things you need to do is eliminate who you owe, right? The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Do not be one of those who shakes hands in a pledge or a promise, one of those who is surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should he take away your bed from under you? There's a warning there to be on your guard about co-signing for debts. I don't know that many of us struggle with that, but the first one certainly is true. Many of us are in over our heads. And how do we get out of debt? How do you eliminate debt? Here's the first. Have a plan, and couple people out there that know this stuff said we should be living on 80% of what we spend. There's a benchmark for you, 80%. Are you spending more than 80% of your income to live? Because that allows your other 20% to go to pay down debt and to put into savings. I've read the stuff that says that the average family could not put their family on $500 if you had an emergency this week and you needed $500, you couldn't do it. How come? Because you're spending all you have. Because you're living literally paycheck to paycheck. How do you stop that? How do you break the cycle? Have a plan and begin to spend less. Can you find additional income? I was on a youth pastor salary at a church at the time making mid-30s, $35,000, I believe. We were living in a house that was 600 square feet with 4 kids. There was no way you would look at this and say, oh, in fact, we know we qualified for food stamps in our school district because we checked. There was a church of 400 at the time. I asked for more. They said no. So I said, all right, what else can I do? And that started me down the path of refereeing and umpiring because that was additional income. And then I found that there were benefits to me not only financially, but I grew as a person. Are there other skills you have that you could put into use to earn additional money? And it might mean for a season of life that you work a little bit more so that you can eliminate the debt to free up the money. Do you know how much you're paying on interest? That's an interesting thing, how much money you spend each month paying others to have their money. Patty and I did that in the last month because that question just popped for me. We're spending $475 a month on interest on various things. And I thought, doggone, that's like $6,000 a year to have other people's interest. Now, that's our HELOC and that's our mortgage, which is not part of that thing there. But I still wanted to know, how much am I paying other people just to have their money? Do you know? Because if you don't know, you take a look at that and start getting rid of that stuff because it's holding you back. The other thing I said here with debt is you might sell stuff. Is there stuff you have that's valuable that you could let go of to be able to pay down? I have a baseball collection. I've got Albert Pujols, and I've just got some good names out there in baseballs. And I'm right now entertaining the thought, Why do I have that? Because I've talked to my kids and none of them want my baseballs. Got Albert, I got Stan Musial, got, Pete Rose, but nobody's interested in them. I still want to leave them out of spite, but that's a whole other conversation. Okay. Here's the last one. Use your money to honor God and encourage others. Proverbs 3:9-10 says, honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce, so that your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly or selfishly, but he comes to poverty. Doesn't make sense. We, in our spending plan, have our gift back to the church as the first expense that we have. Some give back to the Lord with the last of what you have. You've spent everything you've got, and if there's anything left, then you give it. Why don't you give first to the Lord? And here's what I think. This is not guilt. I want you to think about it. We give money to what we value. And I'm an honest, big believer that if you don't think that there's a value in giving to the Lord and to the church, you're not going to put your money there. You're going to put your money to that which you think is valuable. And I know you'll give head nod to it. Well, wait, Mike, no, that's a little hard. I'm just saying that speaks. The average Christian family gives 2.5% of their disposable income back to the church. That's the average Christian family, 2.5%. 100 years ago during the Depression, they figured that people gave during the Depression 3.3%. Let that sink in for a second. We who say that there's more wealth and more money than there ever has been give less than people who didn't have much. And I think it's worth the while to ask why. What holds you back? What prevents it? Mike, why would I give to the church? Why would I do that? Isn't that a fair question? What has the Lord done for you? Not guilt. Honestly asking. If someone really did something, I was going to say like it's easy to go over the top. Let's just say somebody was really gracious to your family and they helped you out. And then you found out they had a need. Would you be inclined to help, or would you just turn a deaf ear? Well, listen, I know you helped me, but tough rocks. You might say, no, man, what do you need? How can I help? That's just on a human-to-human level. We worship, we come in here and we sing these songs, and we say, God is this, and we save my soul, and he's given me joy and peace, and oh, by the way, no. And I don't see this is a disconnect for me. Now you're talking to somebody that for me to get to where we are in our giving, I just had to start giving. There are families here who would tell you, if I could bring them up, they would say, I just had to start giving. I just had to start doing it. You're not going to emotionally feel like it. You just had to say, this is the right thing to do before the Lord. Honor the Lord with the first fruits of your wealth. The little guy, praise team's coming up. The little guy started with what he had, his Smarties, and given them. What are your Smarties? Will you let them go, or do you want to hang on to them? Eliminate debt. Give to the Lord first. Know where your funds are going. Understand that your name and your reputation are the most valuable thing that you have. And above all else, see that the Lord is your provider. To live that way, I promise you, I'd be willing to bet you those $50 that you'd see a change. But you and I, we've got to do that. We've got to take that step. What step do you need to take? Let's get on our feet. Let's sing with these guys.